Generally, the Democrats have reiterated Israel's right to defend itself, and that's a sort of rather bland and all-encompassing term. But as President Obama showed with his two recent statements, first saying that Israel could dismantle Hamas, and then saying they should go after Hamas, but didn't actually talk about dismantling it, suggesting he thinks that Hamas should stay in government in Gaza. I think that the Democrats are in a real bind.
Welcome to The Debrief, where we talk with the Washington Examiner's top journalists about the headlines they're covering and where the story's going next. I'm Sarah Westwood, and I'm here with Editor-in-Chief Hugo Gurdon. And Hugo, in your column this week, you talked about the sort of headaches that some of the more left-wing Democrats are causing for Democratic leadership, and you cited one pretty telling exchange with Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley, who's a Democrat, who was asked about the sort of double standard. If the U.S. was attacked as brutally as Israel, no one would be calling for the U.S. to stand down. Why did you sort of find that exchange and her answer so telling?
Well, I think that what has happened in the last 2 to 3 weeks since the Hamas invasion and mass murder in Israel is that the left of the Democratic Party has become a severe embarrassment and perhaps an electoral liability to the Democrats. And because all over the country, as you see, there are radicals out there protesting in favor of genocide, and there's a small portion, at least, of the Democratic Party up on Capitol Hill, including Ayanna Pressley, Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, who continue to support Hamas. And even though they say that they oppose what Hamas did on October the 7th, there was a press conference that members of the squad called in order to demand a ceasefire. Of course, a ceasefire now would be a victory for Hamas, which because they went in and killed 1,400 people in Israel. Of course they want a ceasefire now that Israel is going back in and perhaps, and one hopes, is going to annihilate Hamas and root it out of Gaza and prevent this sort of thing from happening again. A reporter asked Pressley, isn't there a double standard in that you want a ceasefire? You wouldn't expect the United States to agree to a ceasefire if some organization had just murdered 1,400 people in the United States. And there was a kind of bromide answer, which was, well, we're here to try and save lives, Israelis, Palestinians, Americans. As a sideline, it's worth mentioning that it's interesting now that all lives matter, whereas 3 years ago one could get into a considerable amount of trouble for suggesting such a thing. But then the reporter said, why exactly is it that you don't want Israel to go after Hamas? And Pressley was rather stumped, and in jumped Ilhan Omar saying, how many deaths do you want? How many, would it be 2,000, 3,000? How many would you like? It's actually a question one should ask Hamas. How many do you want before you actually give up this fight to destroy Israel? But, and here's, I'm sorry, getting rather a long way to the point, is that Omar then said, that's a question you should ask Richie. She meant Richie Torres, a New York Democrat, who has been very strong in his condemnation of Hamas and who supports the sending of defensive weaponry such as the Iron Dome missiles to Israel. It was a direct attack on the policies sketched out by another Democrat. And it seems to me this was an example of the way this issue has divided Democrats. They see the squad as an embarrassment in these, and I think that there's a possibility, it's perhaps too early to hope, that this could actually make members of the squad no longer sort of beyond the pale for the Democrats.
How do you think Democratic leadership has handled sort of trying to bridge those divides? I mean, you're looking at Hakeem Jeffries, Chuck Schumer. How do you think they've responded to that?
Well, I mean, generally, the Democrats have reiterated Israel's right to defend itself, and that's a sort of rather bland and all-encompassing term. But as President Obama showed with his two recent statements, first saying that Israel could dismantle Hamas, and then saying they should go after Hamas, but didn't actually talk about dismantling it, suggesting he thinks that Hamas should stay in government in Gaza. I think that the Democrats are in a real bind because they equivocate and they don't actually fully want Israel to destroy Hamas, because Hamas and the terrorists, the genocidal anti-Semites around the world and in this country, are a significant voting portion for Democrats, and they have to try and keep them on board.
What do you think of President Joe Biden's plan to send significant aid into Gaza with Hamas still in control? There are a lot of Republicans who are raising concerns about the fact that this could actually just really sustain and prolong Hamas's ability to use civilians as human shields.
Well, Hamas, resources sent by the outside world do sustain Hamas. It steals from the UN. It was very interesting that just a couple of weeks ago, the UN, there was a tweet that suggests, I think it was something like 20 Hamas trucks turned up at UN depot, stole fuel oil and various other things to go. I mean, they take outside aid and they use it to sustain their war against Israel. I think it's actually very significant that Israel is blamed for the cutting off of resources, electricity, water, etc., etc. They only supply a minority, a very considerable minority, less than a third of those resources for Gaza. The rest is supposed to be supplied by Hamas. But Hamas takes it all, and therefore the people of Gaza depend on Israeli supplies. So Israel gets the blame for cutting them off. Sending more resources does indeed sustain Hamas, and therefore it is questionable.
Well, Hugo, thank you so much for being here today. You can get more writing from Hugo and the rest of the commentary team at washingtonexaminer.com.